Hey everybody, Frank Perini here with a tip for preparing for your PMP exam for Project Management Professional. I did mine, years ago, and one of the things that I always remember from the prep class that I took, there was, a certain number of hours that were required of in-class training, and we had a few different teachers that taught the course at different times. But one of the things that kind of surprised me was almost all of the teachers recommended preparing a cheat sheet. And a cheat sheet was like, you start with a blank piece of paper because you're not allowed to bring materials into the exam. You obviously can use a calculator that's usually provided, or it's part of the computer program, that does the examination. But they'll give you like a blank piece of paper and a pencil, at least when I took it. And the recommendation was, to like force all this memory, look at this blank sheet of paper and just brute force write down your cheat sheet before you even start the exam. They said just practice over and over and over again creating your cheat sheet. So you've got all of your formulas written down in front of you, all of your, maybe you have like block diagrams of processes, for all of the things that you want to memorize for the test. And I just wanted to give my opinion about that. I personally didn't do that at all. As a matter of fact, I thought if I need to do that to pass this test, then this test doesn't make any sense. Now, there are definitely tests in the world that don't really make a lot of sense and you still need to get through them, but I kind of refused to do that. I thought I need to understand this material. As an example, if you were having a cheat sheet, this was a video I made yesterday, talking about communication channels and complexity. And I think they use this formula in the PMP, but these are mathematically the same formula. And, I remember thinking, I don't need to write down this formula, from brute force memory. Obviously, I need to know how to do the math. So, if you don't know how to calculate this, that's obviously a problem, but you have to address that. But this is one of the things that you just need to memorize for the exam. And that's all there is to it. You don't need to write it down on a cheat sheet. You have to memorize the formula. In order to write it down on the cheat sheet, you'd have to commit it to memory anyways. So what's the value of brute force memory of a cheat sheet? It didn't make sense to me. And another thing was, this isn't a list of a cheat sheet, but, people would create these cheat sheets and just over and over practice writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It didn't make sense to me. So, and even if you go on the internet and Google PMP exam cheat sheets, which I've just Googled here, people, I don't know what this is, but just as an example, people would create a sheet like this where they would be like, how do you calculate earned value and actual cost? All of that stuff, they would like brute force memorize EV, AC, CV, all the formulas. And it didn't make sense to me because as long as you understand what it represents, it's really easy to calculate earned value and actual cost, right? And, variance. All that stuff's easy to calculate. It's just adding, subtracting, and multiplying a couple of numbers. The hard part is knowing what it really means. What does earned value mean? What does actual cost mean, right? What does your plan versus your actual, what does your variance, right? What does all that stuff mean? And so my advice to you as a PMP, if you're studying for the PMP, if you're preparing for it, and you're getting the advice to kind of brute force, do something like this person here, where they just over and over write the formulas until they don't have to even think about it, they don't even have to think about, how do you calculate schedule variance, that doesn't make sense to me. Just understand what the schedule variance means. It means you're behind schedule, right? So, it's not a complicated thing. If your earned value minus your plan value, it's just common sense, right? You're comparing what the project has earned, and earned value is obviously the unit of measure is dollars, right? But if it just makes sense, it's just common sense. Your schedule variance is your earned value minus your planned value. If you had planned to build 10 miles of road and you've only earned 8 miles of road, you're behind schedule because you were supposed to have 10 miles done and you've only got 8 done. And cost variance is the same thing, right? Cost variance. If you've spent $10,000 and you've only gotten $8,000, worth of work according to your plan, that means you've overspent by $2,000. You've spent $10,000 for the amount of work that you should have gotten, by spending only $8,000. It's just kind of common sense. So my advice is don't just brute force memorize a cheat sheet. I didn't. I went in, I had no cheat sheet. I had nothing. I just sat down, calmed myself down, and used my knowledge of what all of the terms and functions meant. And of course, there's a few formulas that you have to memorize, like this one. There's a couple, and I won't go through all of them, but just this is the kind of stuff that you have to memorize. There's a couple of formulas, there's a couple of definitions, but just focus on remembering the information and don't focus on becoming just a zombie to create a cheat sheet that you can then just copy the answers off of. Maybe that works really good. I don't know. It must work good because it's recommended by a lot of people, but I didn't do that. And I'm glad I didn't do that because I feel like I do have a good understanding of PMP, of work process, best practices. Not everything PMP teaches is perfect, but most of it has a good basis and it can be applied in the real world. So I would encourage you not to do this cheat sheet method if that's what your instructor is telling you, to just brute force memory, write down all of your calculations, write down all of your terms, write down all of your, all the information, the processes and the knowledge areas and all that stuff. I mean, just prepare for the exam and try to understand the material, and I think you'll be more than well prepared. I feel like anybody who's well prepared for this, there's really no reason not to do well. There's no surprises, there's no trick questions. It's just, do you understand what we mean by actual cost, right? Do you understand what we mean by earned value? So that's my tip for today, is don't focus on creating a brute force memory cheat sheet for the exam. Instead, focus on understanding the material and just being able to explain to somebody in plain language what that means. And I think you'll do just fine for the exam. So feel free to like and subscribe to this video. I'll be continuing to give information about the PMP exam, also tutorials for working professionals, like on tools like Microsoft Project. So if you're a project manager or program manager, I think you'll find this channel very informative. So feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.